Hello, Ollie.
Hi, Marcos. Nice to see you
Evening.
again.
Likewise, likewise. So we are continuing our ramble through the signs of the zodiac and the body parts that they rule and medicinal plants that might be associated with those signs.
Absolutely. Yes.
Excellent. So I think last time we left off with Virgo. So we're
That's right.
starting
That
with
is
Libra.
right. Yes. An interesting one. Obviously, Libra classically rules the kidneys, particularly, and the reins, as Culpepper puts it, which, if you look at the pictures of the kidneys with the tubes running off them, it does look like a pair of horses' reins that you might, and I guess that would
Yeah,
be
yeah.
something.
I've always wondered about that. Yeah, that's an
That would
interesting
be
one.
something, presumably in Kilpatrick's day, which would be much more immediately obvious than us today. I mean, so we don't,
Yes. Yeah.
not a lot of writing done among the herbal community nowadays. I could be wrong about that. Please write in if you're a
Yeah.
writing herbalist. I'd
Yeah,
like the idea of
not that we
that.
want to invite angry comments from the host of Herbal Equestrians that follow us, but just
Absolutely not.
uh,
So I was looking at my Culpeper before this, and there's actually only, I think, one herb, which is a very obvious one, which Culpeper actually says, and he says it rather an odd way. He actually says, where is it? Venus challenges a herb under Libra, and the lucky herb in question is, of course, Kidneywort or Wall Pennyroyal. Again, not something I'm very familiar with. Does it have a different name nowadays, Marcos?
no, and it's not one that I know of or use at all. So that's interesting. Do you know the Latin name for it?
No, I don't. I don't. Sometimes with Culpeper, it's quite difficult finding Latin names. You actually have to go to description because there's so many. It's rather like lungworts. At least two things to call lungworts.
Yes,
So you have to
I
put.
know the lungwort. I know lungwort is either marchantia or pulmonaria, which are very, very different, aren't they?
Yes.
So I know I'm getting confused. That's liverwort that's marchantia. Lungwort is usually pulmonaria, but
Yes.
liverwort can either be hepatica or marchantia. So, but anyway,
Right.
this is why, for all the trouble that botanists cause by renaming things in perpetuity, they are quite useful because having the
Yes,
Latin
indeed.
name.
Yes,
So
indeed.
liverwort. So you said navel wart or wall kidney
Kidneywort.
wart.
Kidneywort, which of course is absolutely appropriate for a Venus in Libra.
Oh, interesting. The one I was going to mention was Eryngium. He also says that's
Oh, does he? Don't know.
yeah,
Right.
Eryngium maritimum, sea holly. But kidney wart, I haven't. So if you maybe can you talk a little bit about kidney wart, Ollie? Because I'm going to try and find
I
out
can
what it's.
indeed. I mean, what Culpeper says, where is it? Venus challenged the herb under Libra, and the juice of distilled water being drunk is very effectual for all inflammations and unnatural heats to cool a fainting hot stomach, a hot liver, or the bowels. A herb juice or distilled water thereof, blah, 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 heals pimples and is fire. And the said juice or water helps to heal sore kidneys, torn or fretted by the stone, or, and this is an interesting word,
Yeah.
exulcerated within. So basically, nasty stuff happening inside your kidneys and brains from kidney stones.
So
So, I
so
mean,
no, carry on. Sorry. I was just thinking aloud.
so I mean, he also uses it for the piles. It's one of these ones that has multiple uses, which I mean, you'd expect from a Venus herb. But yeah, very specifically for the kidney stones, which is interesting and maybe one worth looking up again. Because yeah, it's not one I come across, and that sounds wonderful. But maybe I mean the other thing, obviously, as we know with Culpeper, some of the herbs that he used regularly are really not used anymore because they're actually considered slightly poisonous now, like ragwort and things. So we've always got to be a
Yes.
little bit careful
Oh,
as to why
definitely.
they've fallen out of use.
Yes, yeah, exactly. We've got to be got as we mentioned before with Culpeper is a brilliant reference, but one has to be a little bit careful. Just because 17th century chemistry is not wasn't a thing. So there are things that they were very subtle and ingenious in many ways, but there are some things that nowadays we'd regard as simply too dangerous to use
Yeah,
internally.
absolutely.
And in other ways, they were more cautious. Like Culpeper says, henbane, for example, is not to be used internally.
That's right. Yes.
Never. you know, whereas nowadays, of course, as herbalists will happily give small doses of it. But so just to sort of fortify, or I'm losing my words this evening, but just to Mercury retrograde, folks. So sorry about all this. We're both, certainly I've experienced a few Mercury retrograde issues this time around. But yeah, no, this is a Libra herb. He's classified it under Libra. Firstly, it's under Venus because, as you mentioned, Ollie, the kidneys are a primary focus of its action, and traditionally Libra rule the kidneys. And secondly, because it's cooling, it has this cooling anti-inflammatory action, so it's opposing Mars. And Venus was symbolically Mars's opposite. Venus cooled down what Mars heats up. Venus heals what Mars divides, and all the rest of it. But it's specifically under Libra because Libra was the part of the body that rules the kidneys. So it's not enough in this case for it just to be Venus. It's got to be Venus in Libra just to really emphasize the kidneyness of it all. But I have not yet managed to find the Latin name for this, which I really want to find, because what's interesting is it's coming up really annoyingly as liverwort when I searched Kidneywort, and Mrs. Grieve, which is a 20th century herbal, it came up as liverwort as well. It's one of the common names for another kind of liverwort, which is neither Marchantia nor hepatica, but Anemone hepatica. But I'm not sure. I need to read up on it because it's native to woodland in temperate regions of the northern hemisphere, but I'm not sure that might not be native to America. And also, being an anemone, it's usually going to be caustic. So I'm not confident about the botanical identity of that herb.
Well, the other the other name he gives it is Pennyroyal, Wall Pennyroyal. So I don't know if it's like one of the menthas, like so because there's so many bloody Pennyroyals as well. But I mean, there's one here called Umbilicus rupestris, which does look a bit like his description.
Yeah, the one that came into my mind when you said it was navelwort.
Because I'm looking at another reference. It says navelwort, also called wall pennywort, kidneywort, and wall pennyroyal. So that does seem to be most of the names Culpeper gives it, other than navelwort, and the photograph I'm looking at does look like his description, which, as I've said, is always a positive thing.
Yeah, no,
this is round leaves. I think it is that one. I think it's the Umbilicus.
I think you're right. In the online version of a modern herbal, which is not that modern anymore, because it's about 120 years old, but we've got Kidneywort. Botanical, the old name here I've got is Cotyledon umbilicus, which has probably been superseded. It's in the Crassulaceae. Synonyms: Wall Pennywort, as you were saying, and Wall Pennyroyal. And remarkably succulent, which would fit with either Moon or Venus. Pale bright green and very smooth. So this,
and that's basically his description of it.
Yeah, and
pale green color.
She actually references Culpeper, the juice or distilled water is very effectual for inflammations, to cool a fainting stomach, etc., etc. So that's a fascinating one. I'm certainly going to do some research. I'll check on the botanical name of it, Ollie, and I'll pop it in on YouTube. I'll pop it in the notes below this, and I'll try to do the same on podcast just to see the botanical name I've got for it is Cotyledon umbilicus.
So that'd be good. I might see if I can get any and plant it, as it's still only April.
Yeah, that would be super.
That would be interesting.
Yeah, that would be super cool. And just do it. Make your own little mini monograph on it or something. Just pull up some of the pharmacology and what we can find out about it. It's fascinating. That's a really interesting choice, Ollie, particularly as it's one of those little plants in Culpeper that I've obviously just skipped over in my about 1,000 readings of it because it's not something I know. It's funny how your brain does that.
What were you going to tell us about Eryngium?
Yeah, Eryngium is, interestingly, he classifies Eryngium similarly as a herb of Venus in Libra. And Eryngium's a really interesting one. It was also known as Eryngos, Erynggoes, and it's referenced in Shakespeare. And I sometimes half jokingly refer to it as the Elizabethan Viagra, because they used to also call them kissing comfits. They used to candy the root. and they used to say it, you know, gives people a bit of a libido, sort of like particularly old. So it was used to sweeten the breath, the candied roots.
Right.
Probably wouldn't have been very good for your teeth, so maybe not sweet for that long, but still, you know, it would also have been thought of as something to increase the libido, which is interesting because, like many medicinal plants, it contains several ecdysterols or steroidal plant sterol compounds, which may speculatively have some hormonal activity. But similarly to the kidneywort, it was used to strengthen the kidneys and for sort of gravel in the kidneys, binary gravel, so urolithiasis, if we're doing medical jargon. And it was a diuretic, but it also had this libido strengthening action, and this action that was strengthening to particularly the male reproductive tract. So I've often wondered about it for prostatitis or prostate enlargement in men, because that combination of anti-inflammatory activity in the urinary tract.
Yes, I'm just thinking about that. That's really interesting. So it must have some sort of effect on that. Yes,
possibly, but I certainly, it would certainly fit with its traditional uses. So, I mean, the only thing that strikes me about it is it's a beautiful plant, sort of like with very smooth but slightly spiny green leaves.
That's
and these beautiful thistle-looking blue flowers that are, and with almost a silvery metallic sheen to them. And the roots, when you dig them up, are sort of an ivory white. They're very, very beautiful. So, and it was slightly
it's sea holly, one of its names as well.
Yes, sea holly, exactly. Yes, no, thank you. I didn't realize I'd not said that, so that's good. So what always makes me curious is that he put it under Libra, and yet it has this sort of metallic looking, quite spiky appearance, which is not something I'd have.
Yeah,
he's obviously put it under Libra for the same reason that he put kidneywort under Libra, because of its medicinal action. And I wouldn't necessarily dispute the Venus rulership of it all, being quite a benign food grade plant. It was literally candied to make sweets. It affects the reproductive system. That's all Venus down the line. But just the architecture of the plant itself and the way it grows in sandy, quite dry soil speaks to maybe something a bit different, you know. So I don't know, but that was my Libra herb. And then I do have one other that's, again, not a Culpeper classification, but my own speculation.
Do say.
Okay, well, that's Kava.
Ah, yes.
And I think that might be Saturn in Libra. That is my own speculation. So anyone who doesn't know, Kava or Pippa methysticum is a plant from Polynesia. It's sort of the sacred entheogen of Polynesia, basically. It's grown in Fiji and Vanuatu and all the islands in Polynesia. And it was ingested as both recreationally and as a sacred drink, and also used in many ways as medicine. And the root stock is sort of pounded in water to make an emulsion. It's not really an infusion, because the sort of fatty, some of the active constituents, we now call them, don't dissolve in water, but they do emulsify. They become suspended.
Oh, right. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So it's drunk as a sort of cold infusion, but it's actually an emulsion. They traditionally used to chew the root and then strain the chewed pulp. Then when the missionaries came and did their colonial thing, they got really they were disgusted by the fact that people were chewing the root, and then everyone was drinking the strained chewed pulp, so they made everyone grate the root instead. But the principle is the same. You just pulp the root and then mix it in water. So Kava is interesting because it's anti-anxiety, it's a numbing anesthetic, it numbs the mouth, but it has a specific action on the urinary tract. It's very good for urinary tract infections. It has this anti-irritating, anesthetizing capacity on the lining of the mouth, but also the urinary tract. And it's got this calming, sort of numbing anesthetic thing. And it was often used when people were sort of sealing contracts or in weddings or things like that. And it was called the drink of peace, but it was used in a very ritual way in Polynesia. It's a very formalized way. So it struck me as very Saturn in Libra, the Saturn element being the literally anesthetic, numbing, pain-killing, high doses of narcotic, but it's the exalted Saturn because it's generally a very friendly narcotic. It's very low toxicity. it's still Saturn. There have been, if you drink too much of the kava beverage in Polynesia, you can end up with this skin condition called kani kani, where the skin goes very scaly and cracked. But the interesting thing about that is if you stop drinking it, it quickly goes back to normal. But there have been some instances of people getting liver failure after taking kava supplements, although that is extremely rare and it's still not clear why that happens. It's thought it was some people maybe can't process it. It's idiosyncratic reactions.
Right.
Maybe it's some contamination, like fungal contamination, some batches, and all the people who got those that liver failure, say very, very small, because kava was hugely popular. It was overtaking the sales of pharmacological anti-anxiety herbs in the early 2000s. It was becoming one of the most prescribed herbs on the planet, along with St. John's wort and ginkgo. And then all of these little cases came out of the woodwork and the sales got stopped. So it did sort of rather activate the conspiracy theorist in me. I was thinking, this is interesting, a non-patentable medicine overtaking the most, but
yeah,
they did happen. But they were all those cases happened in people who were taking standardized extracts of kava, not the actual plant, but a sort of tampered with version of it. And the vast majority were also on an absolute shed load of other pharmaceuticals at the time. But, but nevertheless, I do think it is a good argument for making it a Saturn herb, but it's the exalted Saturn. It's Saturn.
I like that. I like that a lot, Marcus. That seems. I mean, it'd be nice if it had action on the kidneys as well, but maybe.
Well, it is a diuretic, and it does have that action. As I say, it's used specifically for your urinary tract infections and gonorrhea. One of its traditional indications.
So that works as well. No, all boxes ticked, and and it's got quite a saturnine look to it. I grew some. It died this winter actually. I tried to transplant it rather optimistically into the greenhouse, but it might not have died. I'm still hoping it's going to come up.
Kudos, and also amazing that you tried to grow it. That's fantastic.
It lasted a year, so I'll dig up the roots if they're not going to come up and see if they're still intact, and I can tincture it. Considering
this is a very tropical plant, that I think you managed to keep it alive for a year is a pretty good achievement. But we'll see. Hopefully, it'll reanimate. All right.
So next we're moving on to Scorpio. Which is the generative organs, as Culpeper might put it, and in men and women. And that's an interesting one. I looked in my Culpeper then. This is a herb I have never used. I don't know if anyone uses it, so I'm going to ask you about it. Do you know which one it's going to be?
I know Salbred or cyclamen.
No, it's going to be.
Atriplex patula. Is it the stinking arak?
Stinking arak.
Yes,
because it's an interesting one because it's Venus in Scorpio, which is wow, that's okay. And A, it's got a great name. B, am I right in assuming no one uses it anymore?
I don't know of anyone using it. No,
but Culpeper raves about it for the womb. And just said this is the best thing since sliced bread. Well, not exactly.
Not verbatim, obviously.
Not verbatim, but I mean, really, for him, he's like, cock a hoop about it. And I thought that's interesting. And I mean, it's mainly because Venus, I mean, obviously, Scorpio is ruled by Mars, which is in opposition to Venus. So it's an odd one to do. So it's almost as if this is locating this Venusian thing is like, this is specifically to bring sort of that Venusian thing into the areas, which obviously the generative organs are ruled by Mars, but also Venus as well, because there's a lot of crossover in that area, isn't there?
I'd say, just to clarify that, Ollie, and this is, it's interesting to see if you agree with this or not. I would think the gonads of Venus in either sex, because they're the soft, squishy, the testicles in men and the ovaries in women, they're both Venus. Yes. Think about,
No, I have no problem. And they're the bits which has the seed and the egg sort of thing.
Yes, exactly. But they're also the vulnerable bits, right? The testicles, they're the squishy bits. But the penis would be Mars I think in men, because it's the sticky out bit. And but then the rest of the, so that I think specifically the Venus bit is the gonads, is testicles or
But then
ovaries.
why would stinking arak be under Scorpio? Because basically
and the it also rules the internal, like the vagina and the bits that experience pleasure, I think, but and
right,
also
okay.
so with generally speaking, Venus rules the reproductive system as a whole, and I think specifically rules the gonads, because like you said, eggs and whatever.
Yep,
The moon rules the endometrium in women, so it rules
right.
the linings of the womb, the lining of the womb,
Wax
and then
wane. Yep, I see
hence
that.
menstruation.
Yeah.
And then the only bit of the reproductive system that Mars rules, in terms of anatomy, would be the male sticky out bit, the penis. That's my how I divide it up.
But what about Scorpio then?
Well, Scorpio is just the broad whole anatomical region. Scorpio, I'd say, is the bowels, the belly, the bladder, and the either the womb or the penis. It's that whole geographical.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, what? Yeah. Okay. So, stinking arak basically is bringing Venusian stuff into that area, sort of thing.
Yes, and I think the secondary logic of him putting is because it's a stinky. It's not just a herb that targets the womb.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was getting on that.
Yes,
it's unpleasant. I mean, and Scorpio is all about like, ugh, that's a bit stinky. No offense, Marcos.
No, I'm Scorpio rising. Yes, thanks, Ollie. But I'm not too smelly today, actually. But so I think the I think that's it. Because if you read some of the older astrological books about the kinds of places that the water signs rule, you'll find Scorpio rules things like orchards, which are fecund places, but it also rules still and stinking waters like marshes, bogs, sort of muddy, stinking, like cisterns, and what used to call the jakes, which was the, where you all the people, middens, basically, sort of like. So it's kind of like, in the modern terms, it'd be like the septic tank. So it's Scorpio has this paradoxical thing, like all the water signs are very fertile, so it's fertile waters. But Scorpio can also be kind of, because it's a fixed water sign, it can be stagnant water, and therefore it kind of can have, doesn't mean it always has, but it can have this stinky vibe. So,
well, that kind of makes sense for stinking arak as well, because obviously the areas that it's affecting are the uterus and the womb, which are obviously very fertile areas.
Yeah.
And so this is, Venus within that Scorpio fertility sort of thing.
Totally, and it's a fascinating one, and it's not a plant I've used, but I did grow some it's closely related to goosefoot, and I think called Fat King Henry. It's a triplex, so a lot of those. So this, I think I can't remember which a triplex it is. It's one I haven't. It's a species I've not grown, but since reading about it, I've thought.
I think it's. Hang on, it's a triplex Olida.
Olida, that's it. Olida.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ollie.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So it's a triplex Olida, and it's fallen out of use, much as Kidneywort has. And I think there's a good argument for bringing these herbs back, actually having a look at their pharmacology,
definitely,
seeing what how they might work on a mechanistic level, doing a bit of research into their toxicity, and just bringing them back into use. Yeah, so now that's a brilliant one, Ollie. I really like that. I think what would be my Scorpio one? Let's go for you've done a Venus one. Let's do a Mars one. I think you probably know. You know what I'm going to say? Wait.
Not Vitex, is it? No.
No, but that's an interesting one. I don't know where I'd put Vitex actually, but it's basil.
Oh, yeah.
Ocimum basilicum, which is such an interesting one, because if you think about ordinary kitchen basil, what you makes pesto out of, you'd think of it as being a Venus herb, right? It's soft, it's aromatic, it's beautiful, but pretty much universally it's classified as a herb of Mars, And Culpeper says specifically Mars in Scorpio. And if you read some of the sort of more esoteric herbal literature, you'll find Pliny says, I think it's Pliny, it breeds scorpions in the brain with too much smelling, which is just the weirdest thing I've ever heard. So it's so interesting that as we talked about, and we did an episode, few episodes back, called Space Botany, where we talked about the classification of these plants and how there's often, conflict between some ancient authors about 25% or more of the plants. There's no agreement. Weirdly, there's pretty much universal consensus among ancient authors about basil being a Mars plant. And obviously Mars plants you think of as being spiky or toxic, or spicy, burning. None of that for basil. The only thing we can think is that it does have this esoteric reputation as being associated with scorpions. That's what the basilicon, I think, means, is a name, I think, that it imputes, I can't remember the exact translation, but it's from Greek, and it implies both, it has something royal about it, but it also implies a scorpion. I don't know what the translation of basilicon is. I can't remember off the top of my
think
head.
It means emperor.
Right, so it's got a royal connotation.
From the Greek basileus, and obviously, if you think Roman emperor, that's all about sort of war and Mars and things. So
yes,
it kind of fits.
But then you think about the basilisk and all of that.
Right,
it has the kind of snaky, serpenty vibe to it. So basil's an interesting one. So what Culpeper talks about is it's useful as an oxytocic or parturient, a herb to help speed up the birthing process. And expel the afterbirth. But it also has, he doesn't talk about it much more than that, about the seed being useful for melancholy in the heart. But if you read some other authors, they sort of say that basil is also useful, sort of tonic against catarrh and diarrhea and for nervous symptoms. So it's a fascinating classification, because really the herb to me does not scream Mars at all, and yet it's consistently been put under Mars and under Scorpio. So very, very interesting. And the only other thing that made me think maybe that's the sort of Scorpio classification, the large doses of Mars, because the essential oil contains I think some interesting compounds like estragol. If you take very large doses, like if you juiced a whole bunch of Mars, like a whole Mars plant, and just neck the juice, it would probably make you fly a little bit. Like it's a little bit, but
would it give you scorpions in the head?
Maybe. Well, it might actually. Estragol is slightly carcinogenic, so yes, but potentially. But we know that Mars, some of the sulfur compounds in Mars are actually really good for the liver, and they generally help detox various compounds. So I do. Far be it from me to question all our forebears and all of their classifications, but it seems to me that this classification is rooted more in mythology than in the actual behavior of the plant, which is...
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah.
It is an interesting one, but there's also, I mean, we could go on, but shall we...
Let's press on to Sagittarius, shall we?
Yes, let's do that.
Yes. Now, there's not... So, I mean, Sagittarius rules it rules the thighs and the buttocks, basically, doesn't it?
I'd agree. Thighs.
That's the area. So, would you say there are any secondary attributions?
I'd agree with that, and I'd say maybe the sacral spine and the coccyx.
Right. The sacral spine down there.
Yes, in the same way that when we did Leo and Cancer, and we said sort of Leo was the spine and the heart and the sort of supportive bit of the thorax, the external bit, and Cancer was all the squishy internal bits with the heart. I sort of think of Scorpio as being the squishy bits of that sort of undercarriage, the bladder, the bowel, the squishy bits, and the generative organs, the rectum, all of that. And Sagittarius as being the hard external bits, like the hips, the hip joints.
Right. Yeah.
But also, as you said, weirdly, it's given the buttocks.
Yeah.
Which I'd have thought were more a Scorpio thing, but traditionally, no, they are Sagittarius.
Well, I suppose they thought that's where, but I mean, you could argue that's where the sort of legs start, sort of thing.
That is true.
Or
yes.
where the division starts.
And I think the idea is they're big muscles that actually give a lot of power.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Mm.
So, I mean, and again, there's not a lot of, I mean, obviously, you know, various problems with the upper legs would come under. There's not a lot of herbs, if any, I think, in Culpeper that are specifically assigned to Sagittarius. Beyond that, you know, it's a herb of Jupiter and probably would be good for, you know, Sagittarius and but
yeah, you're right. It's oddly neglected, isn't it?
but
I
then
mean,
if he's using it just in the terms of, like, you know, this is the thighs and buttocks, I mean, beyond that, like,
yeah, there aren't many target organs in the hips and thighs and so hips, thighs, and buttocks. Although it might be useful if they were, because a lot of people do get symptoms, particularly in the thighs. Do you know what I mean? And hips.
They do.
So,
they do. Yeah.
Osteoarthritis, fibromyalgia. You know, there's loads of things that sort of like can show up.
Would you in Decumbershire, if someone said had hernias in which, you know, can appear, you know, pretty much at the upper thigh, would you cover that up? Would that actually call that Scorpio, or would you push that into Sagittarius?
If it's in the upper thigh, I'd Sagittarius it, I think.
Yeah,
if it was in the lower belly, like say if it was a suprapubic herniation, I'd probably say Scorpio, because it would be just above the naughty bits. But if it was in the thigh, maybe femoral or inguinal rather, I'd probably push it over into Sagittarius. So interesting. I mean, do you have any herbal suggestions for Saggy, Ollie? I've got one, but it's non-native. It's disappointingly non-local, but that is perfect for Sagittarius.
I don't think I do. I mean, I need to think about it, but it's a really tricky one.
It is because the nature of the sign is fiery and hot. It's a multiple, because it's a double-bodied sign. It's one of the mutables. All the mutables have
double-bodied sign. I mean, you see, whether it would apply to something that, like, you know, the sort of, you could apply it to the motive power of the legs, so something that was, you know, that was sort of muscle strains or something like that, or because it's Jupiter, it's ruled by Jupiter as well, so, you know, it would be a sort of benefic sort of herb that was.
Not necessarily, because this is the whole thing and the beauty of it, isn't it? We could choose a herb that was martial or saturnine.
True, and whack it in that area. Yeah.
So we could use that as Culpeper does with you know, with their attributions. This is the whole thing. You can choose. You know, the planet is the primary descriptor of the herb's nature, but then you can geographically assign it.
I'm going to have to, you know, put up
pass on that one.
So
no, and I totally get you. And the only reason I do this one is it's one of my earliest and favorite herbs, but it's very, very not local. But that's okay for Sagittarius, because archetypally Sagittarius likes to look far into the distance and travel there. Like a classic. If we were to traffic in astrological stereotyping, which, as I've said many times, we do not do here, but if I were to indulge in that, the Sag thing is the classic 1,000-yard stare. You know, you're talking to them and they're looking over there, because they're like, it's always the same sort of the whole thing of Sagittarius is it's a fire sign, so it's interested in the future, it's interested in inspiration, but it's because it's mutable. There are always different angles that it likes to be inspired by and look at. So this is a very modern psychological take on the sign. Traditionally, it would be said to be mutable, fiery, and it was a master of stratagem, interestingly, Sagittarius. So anyway, my herb would be ginseng, Korean ginseng, Panax ginseng, Korean or Chinese ginseng.
Interesting one. So
why?
Why?
Why? Why you done that?
Would that be under Mars or Sun initially?
Sun. Yeah, good call.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say ginseng is definitely Panax ginseng, to be specific, the Chinese or Korean ginseng, and specifically the red ginseng. So I would say it's definitely a solar herb, because solar herbs increase vitality. They have this sort of warming, revivifying faculty, which all of which is ginseng. I mean, it's literally used to extend life and to increase the life force, to replenish qi in Chinese medicine, which in the Western terms would be vital spirit. So it's solar. It's a solar herb par excellence. But what makes it Sagittarian for me is that it grows in sort of mountainous regions, which are sort of very sort of Jupiterian. It's quite a rare herb, and obviously for us in the West, it's exotic, which it isn't if you're Chinese, but you know, whatever. For us, it is.
I think it's pretty exotic if you're Chinese as well, to be honest. I mean, it is
true.
It comes in the ornamental boxes tied up with ribbons and stuff.
The wild ginseng for sure. Yeah, you know, I bought a root the size of my pinky when I was in Beijing for £100 about 7 years ago. I gave it to my dad, who did what he usually does and took it and said, I said, "Did you notice anything, Dad?" "No, not really." That's the usual response. So just anyway, ginseng's fascinating. So anyway, so the classification I would say is because it has sun, solar for sure, increasing vitality, all the rest of it. There's various aspects of the mythology that are quite solar to me as well, like the root said to get out of the ground, a bit like mandrake in the West, but very, very different in the sense that this was a root in the shape of a man that would climb out of the ground at night and walk around in the form of a child.
Yes.
Really interesting mythology. Anyway, so the Sagittarian bit to me was the fact that it's an Eastern herb, and the fire signs, according to William Lilly, were Eastern from our point of view in the West. And obviously, this is a Western astrological tropical tropical system we're using. It was somewhat exotic. It has this sort of heating, warming faculty. There's nothing to me that connects it specifically to the thighs, but there is. I was trying to think if there's a duality to its nature. In fact, if you give me a sec, I can pull up. I have a little presentation where I worked on the classification of it. It'll take me a moment just to sort of pull that up. I don't know if you could. Can you throw in any ginseng facts while I'm doing?
Well, I'll throw in a Sagittarius fact that popped into my head while you were doing this. I mean, obviously, the archetype of Sagittarius for Centaur is Chiron the Centaur, who was a great healer. And so I think that's where the stratagem bit comes from, because he was one of, he taught Achilles all about war and strategies and stuff. And also, and I quite like this idea of ginseng coming under Sagittarius as a sort of, the universal panacea sort of thing, which kind of fits quite nicely in the mythology of that.
Yes, that makes sense.
And also the vitality. I mean, the sign is half horse, half man. And so, it's a stallion. They were always meant to have the vital power. That was, that was one of the symbols of power, was always a stallion. And so this is not another nice sort of ginseng sort of thing we can point at. But we should be just classifying all sorts of things under this now. I have to rethink the whole Western astrology. I like it a lot so far.
Okay, so what I've got here is Panax ginseng. So in terms of habitat, I classified it under the sun. Okay, so that was all solar classification. And then, I thought Jupiter dignity because why? Because I thought the Jupiter-y thing about it is that it was said to grow sometimes in sacred places and well-tended gardens. It's very esteemed, very beneficial, very sweet tasting, and very gentle. It has a sort of tonic sustaining action, a very wide range of uses and applications. And traditionally, some of the myths, it was associated with riches. Well, apart from anything else, like I say, a root the size of your pinky costs over 100 quid, but it's also associated with the natural spirits, or that would be how we describe it in Western terms. So that's all Jupiter-y. And then body parts, it's associated with the brain, which would be Aries, but not really any Sagittarius body parts. It grows in high places, which would indicate fire, because that's like mountains, high up. And it's cultivated sometimes, which would be air signs. The root to use, which might be earth. I'd say I'd put it under common signs, because there are multiple forms and it's very widely dispersed. There are so many different varieties of ginseng. And and I put it as the sun in Sag because it's half human and half wild with a strong Jupiter influence. So that was my thinking. So
I'll buy that for $1. Yep, okay.
I'm not 100% on it, but I thought it has to be a fire sign, and I either put a fire or air. So my other thought would be the opposite sign, which would be sun in Gemini, but because Gemini, it's a human sign. Yeah, exactly. Gemini's too nervous system.
I prefer Sagittarius. I mean, it's not got that sort of nervous energy that it would appropriate.
No, and I think it had to be a fire sign, and I wouldn't put it in Aries because that's too quick and too uplift. Leo maybe, but then I thought actually on balance I prefer Sag because of the multiplicity of its forms.
I prefer it too. Yeah, it's nice. I think that
I mean, I mean, I am fully making this up because I'm just using, but I'm trying to use some of the traditional rules. So,
to be fair, if you look at some of the rulerships, like, you know, it's not as if the astrologers of the time agree with each other either. So,
true.
I mean, you know, they must have made a call at some point, thought, nah, it goes under here.
Yes, exactly. And I do think there's something about the one of the aspects of Sagittarius is associated with Chiron, who's a healer, apart from anything else. But it was also this half wild, half intellectual sign, half human, half very cognitive, and the other half is this fire side that's very impulsive and very driven and whatever. And I don't know, there's something about the mythology of ginseng which really resonated for me with that. The fact it's this wild plant that you have to go on crazy hunts for, but then it has this really it's processed, highly processed and very highly regarded and all the rest of it. So I don't know, it seemed to me to fit. But anyway, right, we've gone on far too long today.
Far too long, we've rattled away. But another fascinating one. Thank you, Marcos. That's given me 2 plants to grow. Maybe I'll try and grow ginseng as well.
Oh my God, as if you're not growing one that's really difficult already, Ollie. Do you know?
No, but it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Okay, this is awesome. I will never argue with you taking on a challenge, so that's great. But you've also given me the Kidneywort to research, which is something I've completely overlooked. So that'll be interesting.
Definitely.
Anyway, right. So
next time.
Till next time. Next time we'll be going over the last 3 signs of the zodiac. And if folks, if you've liked any of this, please do like it, please share it, please subscribe. And do leave us any comments or questions because we will read them and we will discuss them. So fantastic.
Till next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ollie. Bye.